year, so we're very excited to be here, and we're celebrating with our center stage conversation number 5. This is Music Industry Basics, Empower Your Career, with Jono Manson, singer, songwriter, instrumentalist, producer, and owner of the Kitchen Sink in Santa Fe. Andrea Magee, singer and founder of SheRises. Look that up. Moderated by Tracey Whitney. Tracey is a former Raylette with the legendary Ray Charles. LA native, Tracey Whitney began performing with her family singing group, the Whitney Family, debuting at the famed night spot, the Coconut Grove, when she was just 11 years old. For the next 15 years, her family toured, recorded, did numerous TV shows, performed in Vegas, Tahoe, and more before she was tapped to tour with Brother Ray. She spent 5 years singing solo in Tokyo, Yokohama, and Tokushima, Japan, before returning to her roots in Los Angeles. Tracey served as president of the Musicians Association of Albuquerque, Local 618 of the American Federation of Musicians, from January 2017 to December 2023, representing 250 musicians, comprising the New Mexico Philharmonic, the Santa Fe Symphony, the Santa Fe Opera, and El Paso Symphony Orchestra. She is a current member and former president of the Board of Directors of the African American Performing Arts Center Foundation, a voting member of the National Academy of Performing Arts and Sciences, AKA the Grammys, a music commissioner for the state of New Mexico appointed by Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, an AMFE advisory board member, a community advisory committee member of KHFM Classical Radio, and a jazz vocal instructor at the New Mexico School of the Arts in Santa Fe. Thank you, Tracey.
Jesus Christ, I want to meet that girl.
Thank you for everything you do. Have a great event. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you. That was nuts, right? Who is that girl? I don't know who that is. How many professional musicians in here? That's okay. At least 50% of us in here. So I'm sure that you're going to get some really valuable information. I am so excited to be up here with this cast of characters. Yeah. I guess you could say 2 as a cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jono, tell us a little more. See, I'm not going to talk anymore about my background, so tell everybody about yours.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jono Manson, and I am a lifelong professional musician. I grew up in New York City, started studying my primary instrument, which is the guitar, at age 6. Formed my first band at age 7, for real band. We weren't good enough to play the songs that we heard on the radio, so we were forced to make up our own. And I started my career as a songwriter then. I can still remember the songs that I wrote when I was 7. And if you come to the Smoky Note tonight, I'll play you one if I can remember it. But and that's how my career started, collaborating with other people, learning by collaboration. And by my early teens, I was already playing in bands and working in clubs in New York, because back then, in those days, they didn't really care if you were underage. And as soon as I was out of high school, I went straight into a career as a musician. And that's all I've done, apart from the fact that in my mid-20s, I also began, I built my first recording studio in an apartment that I was living in Brooklyn, to the dismay of my downstairs neighbors, and started recording bands. At first, musicians that were part of the scene that I was in New York at the time. This is sort of early mid-1980s. And so I've had sort of a dual career, both as a performer. I've been in bands that have had record deals with major labels, and I've, as a solo artist, have managed to put out records far and wide, big and small, and at the same time also have worked all this time as a recording engineer and producer with musicians all over the world. and I've had a little luck with doing music for film and television and things like that. And I would say I'm very fortunate. I've been a working musician now for over 50 years, and I would say that the one thing I could say about my career is that I've managed to by diversifying, but also being open to possibilities that I hadn't imagined when I first started out, have a rich career without necessarily needing to become a household name, and proud to be a working musician, and to have spent my life making music and helping others to do it.
Can you tell us just a little bit about the kitchen sink?
Yeah, I moved to New Mexico 33 years ago now, just about, and I live in Santa Fe, and I have a studio that's been in its current location for about 9 years and has existed as an entity for about 20 years, called the Kitchen Sink. And it's right downtown. If any of you were ever at the old Stepbridge Studios, it's in that building that used to be Stepbridge, which is right in downtown Santa Fe. And it's a beautiful facility that was built I didn't build it, but when I first moved here, I worked there quite a bit, never dreaming that would someday be my place. But dreams can come true. You too can own a recording studio and work 7 days a week tirelessly. But yeah, exactly. But it is a dream come true. And for a working musician and for a songwriter and composer like myself, it's nice to when I can be able to have a place like that to use. But it's a beautiful studio, and I work with lots and lots of local and regional artists, as well as people from all over the world who are coming here. And when I took over that particular space, it had kind of gone fallow. And any of you who've ever tried to start a studio or something of this nature know that, like, the not to sound too wowy about it, but the energy in a place can be stagnant. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Those are the laws of physics, and this place was very much at rest. So it took a little time to get it going and put it and energetically make it feel great again, and now it's back on the map too as a destination studio for bands and producers from all over the world. So it's rocking.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Andrea, tell us about your background as well, and I want you to also touch on your nonprofit.
Oh, great. Check over here. Hi, everybody. How y'all doing?
You're going to hear that lovely Irish accent.
So I am originally from Ireland, born and bred there. Started music from a very, very early age in a family band. Around the age of 7, I picked up my Celtic Irish drum and found my own way with it. And I was also into Irish dance. So music was just a massive part of my life from a very, very early age. I followed that the whole way through school. I got a degree in music, and I also got a master's in education, and I became a teacher for a few years. But from the age of 7, I was bitten by the bug for performance and songwriting, so that was always deep in my soul. And even when I was, trying to make like a sensible career out of music, I couldn't ever let go of that call, and that, I could say call or scream or roar. All of those. And when I was in my late 20s, actually, I decided I met with a friend who's now a music partner in a duo that I'm in. And we decided to come over to America in 2014 and just completely go for a life that we really dreamed of. And it was one of the most frightening, scary, crazy things that I have ever done. We didn't know anybody. We removed all security. We jumped on a plane and we flew to Seattle, and we did 21 cities from Seattle to Boston. And if we didn't have a gig, we found one. And in that moment of my life, it was hustle central. Didn't really have a major thought out plan at this point, other than just, I have this calling and I want to answer it. And crazy experiences, I'll keep it short, that just kind of throughout the period of first coming in 2014, that just kind of developed into that I made the right choice and that I was following the right path for myself, was I got picked up by a record label. I got taken out on tour with Brian Wilson, did 3 years on the Pet Sounds tour, toured with Jeff Bridges, did a lot of opening act tours, all from taking this one chance. And then from that, I'm based out of Austin, Texas now, where I perform 3 to 4 nights, if I'm not touring, a week, to beautiful full rooms. Actually, on a Monday night, it's one of the busiest nights that I do, and it's a listening room to maybe about 80 to 100 people. It's things that my parents still don't believe. They're like, what? So I feel like I've figured out a way to become like a kind of middle of the road musician that can survive and sustain and support herself through music. I also realized I had to get innovative with my career. From everything moves so fast. 1 minute you're on tour, the next minute you don't know where you are. You've got a record deal, you don't have a record deal. That's been very much part of my career, and I've just gone with the flow throughout it. But I realized that wasn't enough for me, so I wanted a bit more of a security. So in the last couple of years, I started my own music festival and started my own non-profit, so that I had like a baseline that I could really give back through music while also continually chasing my career. So in a nutshell, from Ireland, and very grateful that I get to make music my life here, and I'm sitting on this stage in Albuquerque. So thanks.
So your SheRises, you touched on that a tiny bit, but I don't think that gave us an idea of what that actually is. So tell us what that festival is.
Yeah, so I think from my journey from just being a female in the business when I came over here in 2014, and I'm a everyone is welcome person. I believe in a whole community. But I do recognize that as women, we haven't been given the same opportunities all the time. So that has been another little fire in my soul. So I started this music festival to uplift and empower women in the music industry, and it's called SheRises. It's in Taos, New Mexico at Kit Carson Park. And our whole motto is that when she rises, we rise. So everyone is welcome, but the premise of it is to uplift women and give women more opportunities with fair pay and have them be seen and have a platform. So it's a beautiful offering, and I swear the men that attend it and support it, I feel like they have wings of their own, to be able to do that with such security is beautiful.
So as you guys can see, this is a pretty awesome panel up here. So I know that we have an outline of what we're going to touch on, but one of the things closest to my heart, and I mentioned this to my fellow panelists earlier, is the very non-romantic, non-exciting, but crucial component of any music experience, life, career, is you've got to get the business taken care of. And most people just want to be the artist. I'm an artist. I don't think about things like that. You better think about things like that, because it's everything. So as the former president of the Musicians Union, I will tell you that some of the most heartbreaking things that ever would happen is when I would get calls from people who had done a session or they had written music and contributed it, and they got paid a flat fee for a day rate, right? You might think that, oh, wow, I got $400 for that, or I made $500 today. Oh, that's great. And then the thing hits. You don't have a contract, and you've got no recourse. So let's talk about the business of music, and then we'll get into the exciting things, I promise you. But I didn't want this, what I consider one of the most important components, to not be addressed because we run out of time.
Sure.
Jono, tell me something.
I'll tell you something. Yeah, I mean, so many of the things that you mentioned are, of course, lessons that all of us learn one way or the other, sometimes the hard way. And, I think, well, first off, obviously, what we call the music business today is different than it was even last year, and it's constantly evolving and changing. However, certain things remain constant. making sure that you protect your intellectual property, making sure that when you engage in collaborative partnerships, things are like, I have a friend in Santa Fe with whom I'm writing songs, and neither of us are litigious people, but like when the first day we started writing songs, I said, okay, we're going to write. We had never written together, and he approached me about. I co-write with a lot of different people, and he approached me about co-writing. And the first day we got together for our first writing session, which was a blast, and we've been doing it once or twice a month for the last year. But the first day, I said, okay, I'll bring a start of a song for us to work on. You bring a start. We'll think up brand new stuff here on the spot. Magic will happen. Things will occur to us in the moment. And everything we do, no matter who contributed what, is 50-50, right? 50% publishing, 50% writers for each of us. He said, done. That's great. So even from the very first moment we started working together, there was no one thinking, well, I wrote 3 verses of this song and you only wrote 1 chorus, and that it didn't matter. It's a collaborative. So defining your collaborative relationships, and then when the time is right, which is usually towards the beginning, actually putting something in writing. And in simple collaborative relationships, you don't necessarily have to contract an attorney to do it. I mean, the drag is when the amount you have to pay an attorney to do a deal for you is more than you're going to make on the deal. That's a drag. Now, there are a lot of resources, volunteer lawyers for the arts, other musicians. I mean, we were talking earlier, and if I had $1 for every hour I've spent talking to other fellow musicians, creatives, and giving them knowledge that I have or seeking it from them.
You can even download now. There are contracts that you can download on the internet or look at it, and then you can tailor it to fit your situation. But at the end of the day, the thing is about protecting yourself, protecting your intellectual property. That's the stuff you wrote. Do you have was there any maybe example that you could give us, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my perspective on this is ask all the questions. Continually ask questions, and don't be frightened of any question. And if you're ever in a room with someone who makes you feel uncomfortable for asking a question, there's something wrong. So take that on board, because I have had moments where I kept asking the same question, and I ended up feeling like, oh, am I not intelligent enough, because I'm not really getting this answer? But the truth is because something shady was actually going on. And that's not to say that will be anybody else's experience, but throughout my early stages in my, when I was 19, 20 in London, when I had my little drips and drabs there, I realized when people can't answer you a question straight, there's something going on. And another thing I would say is empower yourself to say no. As when you're a dreamer and you're an artist and you really, in film and whatever you're in, and you really, that you have that desire that you desperately want this to happen, and you're going to do anything you can to make it happen. When an opportunity comes to your door, sometimes that, our integrity goes out the window a little bit, because you're like, oh, this person's asking me to do this or this, because you're so excited. Take a beat, have a minute, and really check that excitement in and ask all the questions. And I have found that to be incredibly impactful in my career. And there was one particular time where I got offered a solo record deal. And at that time, I really, really wanted that. I was manifesting it. I was saying, this is what I want, universe, come on, give it to me. And I met with all my community. I didn't have the funding to go straight to a lawyer, but what I did do is I turned to all the professionals that I knew, and I got as much information as possible, and I said no. And it was one of the hardest things I have ever done, and it was one of the best things that I've ever done, because it wasn't right. So empower yourself to say no, because it's a powerful thing. Powerful thing, just in case you need me to translate.
Yeah, I was going to say is, we could spend hours talking about, for example, typically how record deals are structured between the artist and a label. And there are so many things to know, but we don't have enough time to discuss the specifics of them. But there are a lot of intricacies, to understand. And like when you're getting an advance from a record company, they're just giving you your money in advance, which they're going to take back from you
And you
if they
never
can
seem
get
to
it.
pay off,
Yeah.
right? You-
Well, in this
and
day
it's
and
never
age,
seem to
black
pay
and
it
white
off.
sad.
yeah,
It's
it's all
never paid
in
off.
there, but you have to understand these
Yeah.
things. Like in 1986, I was in a band that got included on a compilation that was put out by CBS Epic Records called Unsigned, and it was supposed to be the 10 best unsigned bands in America at the time, and we were chosen to represent New York. And yeah. Anyway, so hey, how you doing? On the back of the record, they said we were from Staten Island, but we're not. Anyway, so yeah, I'm walking here. But in order to have one of our recordings included on a record called Unsigned, we had to sign a contract that was like this thick. Right. And we're on a record called Unsigned. And one of the things in that contract was that CBS had an option on us for a period of 12 months after our inclusion in this thing. And we were like, well, that's okay. CBS Records, if somebody else offers us a record deal, they have to say, we have to tell them, and if they don't want to sign us, then they can give us permission to go, or they can say, no, you have to wait till the 12 years are up. But in order to have one song, we decided, we talked to an attorney, and we decided, we weighed it for ourselves at the time. Well, what do we have going for ourselves now? We were young. We said, okay, we can afford to let this be a thing. And we did manage to get in to see A&R people at the label. They ultimately didn't give us a record deal, but that was something. This is an example of a specific clause in a contract that changed. One bad thing that happened was we got offered to be in a movie that was filmed, a movie called Slaves of New York that was filming in New York at the time. I think Bernadette Peters was in it. I was psyched because I like Bernadette. Anyway, so and they needed someone they needed someone right away, as often happens when music is being used in film. Sometimes that's the last thing that gets put in, and they needed a band for a club scene, and they wanted a New York band playing original music, blah blah blah. We fit the bill, and but they needed us to say yes that day, and the legal department called me as the band leader, said, do you have any contractual obligations to any labels or anything right now that we would have to potentially talk to in order to have you be in this movie? And I said, well, actually, yeah, we have this thing with CBS. And they said, sorry, we don't have time to. And they probably would have said, of course they can do it, but the people at the film. So it did work against us in that instance. But these are the specific things that if they come up for you in your career, or maybe they have for some of you, that you need to weigh and say, what do I have to gain? What do I have to lose? Of course, it's always a roll of the dice because you don't know necessarily what's going to come, what an offer is going to, the next phone call is going to be. But so, that's just one example.
Yeah. My family recorded an album one time. We were signed to Warner Curb, and we did the entire album. And one of the producers got into it with the record label, and he had the masters. And he refused to give them the masters, and they had this whole lawsuit thing. And so there goes our album, probably in this guy's garage right now. And, but one of the things I will say, if you're going to spend your money on anything, never, ever sign a contract without an attorney. People will try to you got to do it today. They try to rush you. It's always, if it doesn't happen, then it's not going to happen. Yeah. Because like you said, if it doesn't feel right in the room, walk. So at the end of the day, I just want you guys to, if you are recording, if you're in a band, just be sure that you cover yourself legally. Make sure the contracts, even if you're gigging, right? I had some club owners that gave me a contract, and they literally brought it to the stage and said, sign this. And I said, well, I do contracts for a living, so I'm going to take this home, and I'll bring it back. And he was like, oh, okay. And so I sent it back with my revisions. I'm like, yeah, no. no
Contract for the
changes.
gig that you were playing at that time?
It was a gig. I mean, it was a long-term gig,
Oh, I
but
see.
they brought me the thing, and I'm like, nope. Change this to that. This is that. No, I'm going to have 3 breaks, and there's going to be X amount of time to it. And they did the revisions, and they brought it back. So if they're on the up and up, they're going to do it. It's like, I'm not just. This contract is not just to protect you; it's also to protect me.
One thing that you brought up before we went live was also making sure that you have contracts potentially with, if you're in a band, intra group agreements, because that's how friends can stay friends.
Yeah, that is very important. If you are recording with your friends, you're a band, you guys have been together since 7th grade, you recorded this album, the album hit, and none of you ever thought about what's our percentages, what was my contribution. I'm the drummer, but I'm the drummer. I'm the one playing that. I'm the, I did this, I did that. What's the contributions? So work those out in advance, because we have seen major bands break up because they hit and there was no contract, and now everybody's fighting over the royalties, or fighting over who deserves this, who deserves that. So now we're going to get off of the boring part.
Yeah.
That was kind of exciting.
But that I think very important.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that, just coming from like a emotional standpoint, is push through the resistance to not address that, because like even as I'm listening to it, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think as creatives, we are so sensitive and we're so uncomfortable to those kind of things. But I've read many books on these things to try and get myself, because you don't have the conversation until it's too late. Right. And then for some reason you become a chatty Cathy when it's all about how much you own. You're like, well, shit, I did this, and you stand up for yourself then. But stand up for yourself a little bit earlier in a more beautiful, warm, compassionate manner, where you're looking after yourself from the start and just saying, hey, even if, yes, get your bandmates to do a contract, realistically, is everybody going to walk out today and go, we're going to do a contract? Fuck no, that's probably not going to happen. Sorry for swearing. But what I would recommend, if you can, something that I find really, really helpful that I got passed down from one of my first mentors, was have the conversation about aligning what your mission and what your end goal is, because that is such an important part to a band or any creative endeavor staying intact. Is that, are we aligned? Are you prepared to go that extra mile at the end? Because if not all of the band are, that's when there's also problems. So, and I think that comes to even coming down to contracts, that you can get emotional with it too. I'm a very emotional person, but just wanted to add that.
That's great.
I'm a little more pragmatic, I think.
I love it. We're
Not
good
so
team.
sentimental. I'm like, it's
And
black
I'm
or
kind of
white.
just sort of wishy-washy in the middle.
You're the middle guy. Okay, so guys, let's touch on digital music distribution, because we touched on this before the audience came in, and I've got my opinion of it. I want to hear, Andrea, we'll start with you on this one.
It's like a double-edged sword for me. I can see the massive benefit of it. I think that it's like anything, it's got the social media aspect to it as well, that we now are able to reach so many, and we have all these tools, these amazing tools at everyone's fingertips. But the fact that they're at everyone's fingertips is also part of the problem. So from that 7-year-old that got bit by the bug of creativity and has worked her entire life to get her craft to a certain, level. And I do believe music is for everyone, but I think that it's amazing that it's so readily available, but it can also be that double-edged sword too, because now there is just so much noise that it can make you feel like you're not good enough if you can't break through. And you might have written the most beautiful, well-produced piece of music that in the 70s could be a number one or whatever, but because there's so much noise right now, it's really hard. So my take on it is don't let it beat you down. See it for what it is, and if that's not an area of your career that is flourishing naturally for you, don't give up on it. Educate yourself, ask the questions, look into it, see how you can get better in that area. But also look at other skill sets that you might have that might actually be a bit more enjoyable for you. Is it your live performance? Do you want to get a bit more involved in syncing? You know, there's so much you can do with your career as an independent artist. So I do believe that it is a necessary evil. No, that's a bit of a strong word. I think it's necessary, but it's never going to give us a sustainable income. It is a tool for us to use, and I think let's just be real. Some people really use it to their advantage, and I'm really happy for that, for those people. But for the other people, don't let it make you say, I'm giving up. Yeah, you know, just figure it out. Figure out another way, another avenue in which you can make your living through your art that you love.
Jono?
Yeah, I concur with everything that you just said. And, you know, I think that, you know, debating or hypothesizing, is it good, is it bad, is futile, because it is. This is the world that we're in. And, you know, while, you know, and I came up in the generation, I started being in bands in the golden age of the possibility of economic remuneration for our recorded work. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that unless you continue to make recordings and put them out and leave them laying around here and there for someone to discover and lead to Lord knows what, nothing will happen. So you have to keep doing it. You know, and I think in this conversation too, one really important thing to bear in mind is the following. I mean, the music publishing business is called the music publishing business because it started back when the only kind of what's now referred to as physical content that a composer or songwriter could produce that could be bought was the sheet music. So the music publishing actually was publishing, like pieces of paper. You know, so that was the beginning of people being able to actually, on a mass scale, monetize their songs. And that goes back about 100 years. You know, then slowly recording technology began, but it really wasn't until after World War II, and then with the advent of the 45 RPM single and the LP record, that we had the possibility to make money off of our recordings in a significant way. And then terrestrial radio paid a higher royalty, and Spotify pays nothing. We all know these things. But the point I'm trying to make is that those of us who grew up during that time, you know, and who now are like, God damn it, I used to, it's, if you look at it historically, it's a blip. It's a really like a 60-year window in the history of people making music where we were able to get paid that way. And now, in so many ways, we've gone back to many of the paradigms that existed before, like patronage, for example. Young bands, early composers had to be paid, they had to have patrons. The royalty or the church or somebody had to give them money to live while they composed their operas and symphonies. And now,
I wonder if that's where the word royalty came from.
That may be. That's where you get your royalties.
That might be what the royalty is.
Wow, we learned
because
something.
Royalty was your patron.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow.
Get down. We just figured something out. But sometimes young bands come to my studio and they're like, how are we going to navigate this? And you know, there are many different kinds of currency. You know, you have to decide what like you're saying, establish your goal. What is your end game? What currency are you trying? Because we used to tour to promote our recordings. Now we make recordings to promote our brand or our touring, if that's what we do. It's like the complete opposite. But there still is a reason to make the recordings if you have a brand or something else that you're trying to promote. And you know, I tell sometimes young bands that if they, in the case where their currency is currency, which is a tough one sometimes, well, try to get paid for your project before you even make it. do pre-sales of your album through your fans who will probably support you now before the record exists, but most likely once it's on Spotify will just listen to it on their phone and not send you $10. So try to, if you have a fan base that wants to support you, then you can, and then there's crowdfunding campaigns and Kickstarters and GoFundMes and all those things, but these are valid methods for an artist to find a way to at least not lose money making their recordings, and so I think all of this is part of the same equation.
I'm old enough to remember when independent artists first emerged.
Yeah.
That's how old I am. And I look back at the things that I've released on, like, say, anybody here old enough to remember CD Baby?
It still happens.
Yeah. So CD Baby, where you could, as an independent, release your record through them. You'd get them made at disc makers or whatever, and then you'd go, CD Baby would distribute it. And you got paid for every CD that was sold. So say you were selling the CD for $15, $16 and you got $10 or something or whatever off of all of those, right? So you know that, they send you the little chart. This is how many you've sold. This is what's going to be deposited in your account. And you're like, right, okay, so I'm writing this stuff. I'm producing this stuff. And this is my thing. Now I get statements from BMI or whatever, and it will show the number of downloads. And say they sold each of those downloads for $1. Guess how much we're getting back on that? I will get 3 cents on the dollar of my own music that's being sold by people I don't know, that I never gave the rights to sell my music to. So people are selling, they're selling our music all over the world. We never signed a contract with these people, but because of streaming, I'll see these things that like are in Russian or something, I get these Google alerts every day for whatever, if my name shows up, I get Google alerts. And it'll have like one of my songs, and then it'll have in some language that I don't even know what it is. And I'm like, who are these people selling my music? And they're all making money. So Taylor Swift was the strong person that could stand up and say to Spotify or whoever, you're not selling my music. But nobody sitting on this stage is Taylor Swift. So,
No.
The digital thing is like, it is more than a double-edged sword. It's just a stab to my heart.
I just like to add, I agree with all of that. And I think that it is a tool for us too, though, I think it's really, really important to, if I can share personally how I have made a career with a sustainable income, it has been through building like one fan at a time. Perspective, like a real person, not behind a screen. And I am very fortunate. I live in Austin, and Austin has an incredible music community. And I'm just going to be really real here. The age demographic probably does make a difference. Like most of my fans are a little bit older, and they're not afraid to buy music or pay for music or tip the band and it's probably because they can. But I would love to see the world changing in some capacity, that we change our perspective, that we don't blink an eye about spending $6 on the most pompous, crazy coffee on the planet. Yeah, we'll like look at like a ticket for a show that might be a little bit like, $10-15, what? When you've probably had 2 of those coffees in the, yesterday. So I think that there's work to be done in a way that we know that Spotify, we know that streaming is not going to bring us an income that keeps us sustained and helps us pay for our rent and our bills, but there are other ways that we can do it. And I do believe in people, and I do believe that if we talk about it enough and we change perspective, that we can change the younger generation's perspective on what feels okay emotionally for us to spend our money on. And I hope that we can make that become the arts, because it could become a festival ticket, or there are just ways that we could change it around.
Yeah,
Younger
I agree.
people do feel like they shouldn't have to pay for things.
Yeah.
It's like if they can why am I paying for this? This should be free, and it's interesting.
Yeah, and you can't blame them for feeling that way because it exists. It's there. You know, I have a 14-year-old daughter who is herself a musician. She's actually a far more gifted musician than I already. I can tell you that. And she's very passionate about music. She loves music. She listens to her music. She listens to the music that she listens to for recreation exclusively on her phone. And we went out and when it was time, we went and got the big Bose, the really nice one for the living room, so she could hook her Bluetooth. She asked, "Don't you want to listen through that?" She said, "No, this is fine. This is how I want to consume it." Yeah. Jinx. And a couple of months ago, we were up. There's a room upstairs in our house where I have my albums, my vinyl collection, the ones that have made it through with me. And I said to her, we go up there and listen to them once in a while. And I said to her, you know, would you like to have these someday? You know, not anytime soon, but you know, would you like these? And without missing a beat, she just said no. No. Yeah, but I mean, you know, so I'm just saying. Apropos of what of what you brought up regarding the age, the gender, the generation gap, you know, certainly my daughter's generation who have grown up, and probably the next generation up who have grown up, you know, in this world, she values music deeply, but she doesn't, and I'm her father. She sees my work every day. She understands very, very clearly what it means to be a professional musician and how hard we have to work and how often I'm not home when I'd rather be, but I have to. But still, that doesn't change the way she feels, is all I'm saying.
I think it's good to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think it's just really good
Yeah.
to talk about it so that the younger generations that come up that want to be musicians are aware. You know, we just it's our responsibility, whatever walk we're walking, whatever year we were born, whatever that is, we just got to keep communicating and sharing our experiences so that the people that come behind us can have it a little easier.
Yeah.
Jono, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You have a studio and you're out there and you're recording all kinds of people. Give our audience an idea of intellectual property and the intellectual property rights and what all that involves.
Yeah. I mean, if you when you create a recording of a song, there are two pieces of intellectual property that are created. One is the composition, which might have been created at a much different time, maybe years, decades before the recording is created. And the other is the sound recording itself. These are two pieces of intellectual property. Now, if you are the sole writer of a song, if you wrote the words and music of a song, you own it 100%. You own 100% of the writer's rights and 100% of the publishing rights. Even if you do not have a publishing entity of your own, even if you haven't established until you create a publishing company and assign your share of publishing on a composition to that company, or you assign those rights to someone else because they're giving you money for it or or myriad other reasons, you own it. If two people write a song together, words and music, then it's not always as the way I described with my writing partnership with my friend that I mentioned earlier. There are very different people write in different ways. Sometimes a big star will call someone to help who's a good writer to come and help them co-write a song. But before they go into it, the understanding is that their share of writers and publishing will not be equal. But there is an advantage to having this person potentially record the song. So there are all different ways that piece of intellectual property, the ownership is defined. And the owner of the recording generally is the person who paid to make it. You know, so if you're in a band and you guys did your Patreon and your crowdfunding and you made the money, or put on your own homegrown festival, or whatever you did to get the money together, then whoever pays. Like, for example, I had an album of my own that came out on A&M Records in 1996. The label paid, well, they gave me some of my own money in advance to make the album. So they owned the masters. They owned the recordings. The songs, however, this is back, in the 90s, labels didn't necessarily ask for a piece of publishing. Now it's very common for labels signing new artists to want to do what they call now 360 deals, where in order for it to be worthwhile for them to put up the money, because it's so hard to get it back from the recordings, they want a piece of the publishing. So if a song goes in a movie or a TV show or somewhere else where it can generate income, they get some. But in this case, the songs on the album were owned by the writers, the lion's share of which was mine. One song from this album was written by a friend of mine named Joe Flood, a former bandmate. And that song, my recording of that song, wound up getting used in a Farrelly Brothers movie called Kingpin, in a very cool scene where Randy Quaid is dancing in drag in a bar. Anyway, so, but I didn't write the song, so there's usually, when you get a song in a film, there's an advance that comes, or a licensing fee. It's not an advance, it's a licensing fee that's paid. Usually equal parts for who owns the song and who owns the recording. Well, I didn't own the song. My dear friend Joe Flood owned the song. So I think it was back then, it was like 10 grand a piece. It was like $20,000 to get the right up front for the song to be in the movie. So Joe got his 10, A&M got their 10, and I got none, even though I'm the guy singing the song. Now later, I got other royalties after the fact for being the performer in the song because my voice was being used. So that's like after royalties and things like that. But for the song itself, I got zero, because even though it was me singing it on my album, I did not own the recording or the song. And in other cases, thank goodness, I've had songs of mine used in similar situations where I owned both of those things and got all the money. So I hope that helps illustrate how it gets divided up. And the same thing goes for, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, remember back in the day when rappers first started sampling everybody's music, and without getting clearances, they didn't get the license to do it, and they were just putting everybody, James Brown, the famous one that everybody used James Brown songs. And these guys were just willy-nilly taking, I was listening to the radio one day and I heard a song, and my brother and sister, it was my family, and it was in somebody's song, and I was like, what the hell? And it's on the radio. And they certainly hadn't gotten clearance from us, but those guys got taken to the cleaners after using other people's music. So if you're one of those people that are considering sampling other people's songs, just be sure that you get the right license for that, so that you don't end up losing everything that you put into it, and then some, and losing your house and everything because you used James Brown's song without James Brown's permission, and the James Brown's family the permission.
Yeah, it's not all horror stories. One time I was working on a record with this guy named James Talley, who's a singer-songwriter from Oklahoma, who had some success he played at Carter's inauguration and stuff like that. He was a real Okie, he's still around, and he had a couple records on, I think, Atlantic in the 70s, and he was at my studio in Santa Fe. This is years ago. It's still probably around the early 2000s, making a record with me. And he called into his home answering machine to check his messages, and he came back in the room. He goes, I just got this call. I got to call the guy back. It's a lawyer representing some fellow named Moby. And he goes, the guy says he wants to use one of my songs that's on this record that's been out of print since 1976. And he found this song of mine, and he wants to use it to combine with his stuff. I don't know what that means exactly, but should I call him back? I'm like, yeah, call him. And he made 70 grand that day, James Talley did. So it's not always that you don't always have to get litigious to get your money. every once in a while, these guys, so that goes back to what we were saying earlier about that is the sense to keep making recordings and leave them laying around, because Moby found this guy's record like in a cutout bin in some record store and said, this looks interesting, and
Do you remember what the song was?
it was for a film soundtrack, and I don't remember. His song was, I think it was called like Evening Rain or something like that, but I never heard the Moby thing. So.
I do like some of Moby's music.
Yeah, and he's
so
good. He's very
I wonder
crafty
if it's something I know.
at doing just that, at taking a pre-existing recording and figuring out how to superimpose his creative ideas on it and turning it into something new. And as long as the person is willing and gets paid, God bless them all.
Yeah, and of course, if you're going to cover somebody's song, that's a whole nother license. So just whatever you're doing, I can't help myself as a union person, always wanting to protect everyone. So I just always go back to protect. It's my middle name.
And
I feel safe.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing. And also just educate.
Yes.
Because I think that it's very easy to get kind of frightened and let fear take over and be like, oh, well, I don't want to lose any of my intellectual property. And you let this fear come in and swallow you up. And yet there are stories that are beautiful stories, and there are success stories. There are horror stories. So make sure the horror story doesn't happen to you by asking the questions and educating, but don't hold on so tight that you don't want to kind of share any of your piece of your pie, because that might open up more opportunities. But just be really aware of what you're jumping into. That's what I would say.
So I'm going to send this one over to you, Andrea. So you're doing a lot of live performing, and you've got your SheRises festival, and you do a lot of touring. So share some of what goes into the tour. She's like, oh, a lot. So what goes into the tour? I mean, everybody just sees the end result. You're on the stage. It's amazing. And, and you're up there, you're gigging, and then it's over. And then, of course, you're high for a couple hours. I don't know about you. It takes me a couple hours to come down from a good gig. From the gig. Yeah. Not from anything else, from the gig. But what goes into what is the process for you of putting together a tour?
I think just planning and preparation, and I've had some real good fortune at getting picked up for some wonderful opportunities, and the reason that they continued to happen. So for example, we got offered to do the very first Brian Wilson show in Dublin, which was amazing for me because I was in Ireland and I got to call my family and be like, shit, and they were like, oh wow.
Did they come?
They did. Everybody came and they were like, oh wow, you're doing something great. But the reason I feel we were only ever offered one, and then from the first one, because I approached it the way that my little crazy organized business brain approaches it, I do believe that then led to all of the next one, because I didn't just come in. I mean, there's two parts of me. I'm a Gemini, right? There's two very clear personality types. I am this floaty little artist that loves all the artsy parts, but then I'm this bad business bitch that won't let anybody, the Irish in me comes out there. And I think when it comes to touring, get in front of it. See, the way that I treated it was okay, in order to sustain this and make this possible, how can I make money? When you're doing an opening tour, you're not really getting massive fees. But what I saw from the very first one, that we were shifting a lot of merch, and I figured out where our little pocket of revenue was. And so I started making, and this is crazy, we started to sell a lot of socks. And I had never thought it in a million years that socks would be this, but socks are something that everybody needs. And I realized that I put socks on my merch table, and I was making a lot of money through socks.
Were they socks with your logo?
Yeah, so it says our logo on it, and it's it's also supporting the nonprofit. Anyway, I think what my point is with that is we're creative souls, right? We are, when we stand on stage, we're creating, but let that go into the business world. And that's what I did with my touring. I got really creative. I believe in the power of relationships, and I think that when I first got onto some of those bigger tours, I started to drink it all in and learn from every aspect of the crew member, the production manager. Like, I watched everyone, and I watched how they operated, and I watched how they talked to each other, and I watched how much respect they had for each other. And I think to have a successful tour or a successful business or anything, it comes down to how you treat other people and how you coordinate in your team and how you work with your team. So for me, I love being on a stage. That's my favorite thing to do. But I also think that there's a lot of work that has to go on behind the scenes so that it doesn't fall apart, so that it doesn't burn you out really bad. And
I want to know about the technical part of it. Okay, we've got this tour.
Mm-hmm.
We're going with X number of musicians.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure there's lodging. We need to make sure there's food. We need to make sure there's transportation. Okay, I think I've just told you guys everything.
Yeah.
that you need to do.
So I think,
But there's, before you ever hit the stage,
there's a
you
lot
have
of
spent
things.
a lot of time and everything.
You're basically a TM. You're a tour manager, and you have to learn those skills. And there has to be somebody within usually I've found in all of my situations, in all of the bands that I play, whatever role I was, I have a duo, I have a full band, I have an Irish band that plays just the Irish circuits. In every single one of those, there's always one person that kind of steps into that role. And I think, again, it just comes down to people management. And you go, okay, you're happy here. You like this. How can I? And usually it's me. And if it's not me and someone else wants to do it, I'm like, happy days. But it's just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you have to do it, though. But I think that, again, it just comes down to communicating with your bandmates. And yes, all those things that you have to think out everything. Yeah. And it is a lot.
You don't want to get in the car and not know where you're going.
No, and I have one
how
of those.
are we going to eat?
Yeah,
where
I have one of those brains
stay?
where I have to know everything. I have to know, oh shit, is the merch there? Is our instruments there? Is our outfit for stage there? What time will we get? There's just, there really is, it's a multifaceted career. It really is. And
That's
if you
why
want to
it's
take
called
it to the
business.
if you want to take it to the next stage, I think that you have to be aware that you are going to wear a lot of hats and get ready to do that. And don't be like bitter about it, because sometimes it's like, oh, fuck me. Don't get like that. Like, just get like, okay, this might not be my favorite part of this, but in order to get to what my end goal is, to have a really great show, all those other things have to happen.
Yeah.
Jono, you and I have spent a lot of time on the road too. Give me an example.
I just want to first just comment on two things that you said. One, about everybody's role, in a different, and I'm starting planning now a reunion gig with a band that I used to be in, and we haven't played a gig with the full lineup that was the sort of the classic lineup of this group that had some popularity in New York at the time, in 38 years. And it's very interesting to see that, like, we've all started, communicating and talking about the set list and the various aspects of things that have to be organized just to do one show. And everybody is falling back exactly into the roles they had in the band 38. Like, I was the you of that band, like the one who was sticking the pins in the map where we're getting our record played to try to figure out where we can tour and all of that stuff. It's just very interesting how those things are how lasting they can be. Yeah. And the other thing that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk about touring was the way you approached the Brian Wilson gig. That's such an important thing. I think that, being fortunate has so much to do with two things. One, being able to recognize the opportunity when it's there, and also being able to know that you can deliver when you step up to that opportunity, and if you don't have the goods, figure out how to have them before you step up.
And even to add to that, the one thing that, we have got some feedback from why we got brought on for 3 years, it was because we treated it with so much respect. We showed up early. We showed up prepared. We knew that our role as an opening act was to have a very small footprint, to not be difficult in sound check, to literally, and also to respect our art. We wouldn't have let anything bad happen, but to be a team player, I think that is a big part of, if that's what you're aiming to do, is to go out and tour a bit more, to tour with bigger acts, like, there is such a big part of that where you have to like just kind of look at what you're doing and like just try and be as professional as possible.
Or you can get picked up like I did for Ray Charles. Got a crazy call on a Wednesday, and the person goes, "Mr. Charles would like to see you tomorrow," and I'm like, "Who is Mr. Charles?" You know, like, Mr. Charles, and who is Mr. Charles? Because they just said it like I should know what this is, and then the girl goes, "Mr. Ray Charles would like to see you tomorrow," and my brain goes, "How did I get on his radar?" But okay, so back in the olden days, we had these things called cassettes. So the cassettes and your head and your headshot and your cassette and your bio, and you had your little promo packet. So I go the next day to audition for him. He wasn't there, so I left my promo pack, and they called me later that day and they said, "You got the gig," a gig I didn't know about the day before, knew nothing about it. So that was Wednesday. Thursday, we started rehearsing. Friday, Sunday, we were at the Hollywood Bowl for the Playboy Jazz Festival. Monday, we were in Denver. And that's how fast it went. And they didn't ask me, "Do you have a family? Do you have a job? Is there any reason why you can't just leave?" But, you know, that's luck, right? The intersection of preparation and opportunity.
Yes. Right. Amen.
So it's about being prepared. And so when you get that call from Brian Wilson or whoever, you're like, "Yeah, I'm ready to go," and you can just pick up and go. Well, let's get into, because touring a lot of times it's your manager. If you're fortunate enough to have a manager, they take care of things like that. So let's talk about artist management.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we've discussed up until now is how artists can remain independent and in control of their destinies. And to a large extent, that's a really valuable thing to get in place before you necessarily get involved with management. And, you know, and it's, if you find the right manager who wants to handle you for the right reasons, they all want to make money, you know, and in very rare circumstances they'll do things based on other motives. But the bottom line is, if you're already making money and someone wants to manage you, that's a no-brainer for them. But if you're not making money, if you're not generating enough income that 15% of what you're making is worth someone's while, it's hard to attract a really good manager, like somebody who's not only savvy, capable, but well-connected. And so a lot of times artists will get offers from, I've had both in my career. I've had managers and I've had mismanagers, you know, and sometimes, you know, again, going back to making sure you ask the questions and know what you're getting into, and so it's a tricky equation. It's like, so, you know, especially now more than ever, I believe, you know, for an artist to find but like I've been self-managed now for the last time I had a manager was in the late 90s. And so for, you know, 25 years plus, I've been completely self-managed. So I manage my recording studio, I manage my career as a songwriter, I manage my career as a touring musician, as a side person in other people's bands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I manage my own website. I manage the studio's website. I do the booking for the you know, but on the contact page of my website, there's a message there that says, I currently, you know, I do have some booking agents in certain territories that I have their listings where they can go, if you want to book me in Italy, talk to this guy, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a message there that says, I currently have no official representation in terms of management or booking. And if you want to manage me, fill in this form. But, you know, even I, who feel self-sufficient,
that's a concept.
You know, I've put the message there and saying, but no one's written me, you know. But I'm just saying, even though I'm content to be self-managed, I'm still, you know, I'm 63 years old. I have no illusions about all of a sudden, you know, rising to the top of the pops. But someone who would help me do the things that I already do. Play listening room gigs, tour, work out my schedules with when I have to be here to produce this record or there to tour with that person, etc. would be welcome, you know? So that's my take on the whole thing.
How about you?
Yeah, I think that I've been very fortunate when it comes to management, and from the get-go, I believe my managers have been more like mentors, and there's been absolutely no qualms about that either, you know. So I have worked with Dave Kaplan and Gene Sievers, and I love them dearly because from the get-go they have told me, you are your own manager. You will always be your own manager, Andrea. And we see that, and what we are just mentors, and we're just supporters, and we are an address book that we will connect. So I think there's two types, or maybe more than two types. From my experience, I got this incredible blessing of this mentorship that I am now like a family member. They were really realistic with me from the get-go, like, hey, I don't think we have the energy to like manage your day-to-day, but we will guide you. And I took that and I ran with it, and I was like, oh my God, that's beautiful. But there are like that worked for me. That doesn't mean that's going to work for anybody else, because I know I'm a bit of a maniac, and because I like to be in control, it probably did actually work. Yet I know there are other managers out there that are brilliant at being much more hands-on. So I think it just comes back to, what do you want? Where are you in this like place in your life right now? Do you actually want a hands-on manager? I know I don't at this point, because I'd be like, piss off, don't call me. You know what I mean? Like, in a nice way. But like, but there might be somebody out there that's like, no, I need to be led every step of the way. And there are people out there that want to be that type of manager. So I think that it's an open book. Yeah. Just, again, sniff out the bullshit. There are ones out there that are in it for the wrong reasons. And I think being crystal clear from the start, like, where are you financially? How much money are you bringing in per year? What does your gigs look like? This is for agents as well. And the reason I got my management deal to start with is that I showed spreadsheets of where I was at. And I think that you need to be aware of your financial status in order to know whether you can sustain yourself as an independent artist. And I think that's a valid part of what kind of a manager you might want to bring into your life, is knowing what you can actually give them, because is the 15% realistic, or are you really just looking for a mentor and somebody to support you and offer you genuine advice?
And then, of course, if you are fortunate enough to get a record deal as well, then you're going to have the attorney. So you've got your manager, you've got your attorney, you're going to have your tour manager, you're going to have your all of these people, and you're
if you
like,
make money, you have a business
I made
man.
all this money, and then you get your check, and you're like, wait a minute, because everybody's getting a piece of the pie at that point. But then you're also doing a lot more, and you've got all of those people. So it is a balance, and once again, it is a business. And I want to thank the tech people, the volunteers, for being here and doing such a great job. We want to thank you guys in the audience for being here, and for, even though we didn't have lots of questions, they were thoughtful questions, and we appreciate that. Please give a hand to Andrea and Jono.
Tracy.
Thank you so much.
And on behalf of the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience, of which I am on the advisory board, I thank you.